Thank you so much for joining us today. And I think we've got people from all over the world. A really, really, really exciting opportunity. So my name is Erica de Groeff, and today I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to What's in a Name. Let's korero, korowai. Welcome to the conversations on decoloniality and fashion. A very warm welcome to Doris DePont, designer, curator, and founder of the New Zealand Fashion Museum, who will be convening today's conversation. Whilst this is an experimental platform that's open-ended, where we're allowed to meet in difference and our unlearning can happen, we're also very reminded to be respectful and be mindful of each other's positionalities and life experiences. And we'd also really like to acknowledge at this particular time the many individuals whose lives have been impacted by migration, by forced removals, by ongoing wars, by so-called progress, and by political, environmental, and social upheavals around the world, contributing to what Sandra Neeson and others have also termed the sacrifice zones. We acknowledge our privileged positions in these dialogues and hope that these opportunities to come together creates inclusive spaces and a range of thoughts and voices to be heard. So with that, thank you so much, Doris. Thank you so much. I'd like to welcome you, Doris, to introduce the people that have joined us this evening and this morning.
Thank you, Erica. Thanks. Great. So, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings to you all, and thank you for joining the conversation, What's in a Name? Kupu and language are important. They have the power to communicate history, values, culture, and to create meaning. Shortly, Patricia Ta'arapo Wallace, Ata Takanua, and Hinakura Smith will korero korowai, talk about korowai. First, though, I'll provide a frame for the next hour or so. We'll open the session with a karakia and introductions. Then each of the three presenters will share individually and together. Following this, we'll open the floor to reflections and questions. To clarify the tenor of this conversation, I'd like to share an email that Hinakura sent to me this morning, some thoughts that occurred to her on her morning hikoi. She wrote, "We need to be clear that this is a 1-hour panel and is not attempting to solve the problem of misnaming different types of kakahu. Instead, we are opening a conversation about how korowai, whatu kakahu, and its language use and the problematic commercialization of quick-thrown kakahu have become acceptable even amongst our own Māori businesses. This is an opportunity to discuss why this is a problem and what we can individually and collectively do to address it." I would like now to hand over to Ata Takanua, who will whakaritia the space for this gathering with a karakia.
Nui tātou, manawa mai te Māori nuku, manawa mai te Māori rangi. Ko te Māori kai au, he mana tupua, ka pakaru mai te pō, tau mai te Māori, haumi e, hui e, taiki e. Ngā rauranga tira tēnā koutou katoa, me mihi ki te kaihanga nāna I homai, nāna anō I tango atu. E ngā pare raukura o te mate, haere, haere, haere hoki atu rā. Hoki rawa mai ki a tātou, tēnā anō tātou katoa. Ko mōtaki ora te maunga, ko manga ōkewa te awa, ko Ngāti Maniapoto te iwi, te waka o Tainui. Ko Ngāti Kinohaku, Ngāti Kuue Kaha, Ngāti Rora, me Ngāti Apakura o Kuhapu. No te kuiti ahau, te whanganui ātara e noho ana, ko Ata Takanua tōku ingoa. I'd like to now pass to Hinekura.
Koe ata nai whakatūwhari I tēnei o ngā korero I tēnei pō ata ahi ki tahi whenua o te ao. Puri noa, tēnā koutou e te iwi, koutou nā e noho ana ki Aotearoa, tēnā no koutou e noho ana ki ngā whenua. Puri noa I te motu, mihi mahana ki a koutou katoa. Ko Hine Kura Smith tōku ingoa, te raro ngā puhi o ku iwi, kei te mihi au ki aku nei whanaunga, ki te mata nei, aku nei hoa, taku hoa Jamie, tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Hine Kura Smith. I'm from no te whā nota, Ahipara, te raro ngā puhi. I can see some whanaunga on here. However, currently I am on the east coast of Oahu in Kaniohe. And it is 9:15 Monday night. So by the time my korero gets to you by Tuesday, maybe it'll make some sense. Tēnā koutou.
Kia ora koutou, ko hikarangi te mauna, ko Ngāti Porou te iwi, ko mata te awa, ko hiru harama te marae o na tipuna, enari, ko o tautahi taku kāinga, ko Patricia Tiarapo Wallace, taku ingoa. My name's Patricia Tiarapo Wallace. I'm a researcher, not a weaver. There was no marae in my young life, no experience of te reo. I came to this field when I was nearly 50, and I'm still learning. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. This conversation has grown out of increasing concern at the way the names of Māori kākahu are currently being used. When Jacinda Ardern made world headlines by wearing a traditional Māori cloak at a state banquet at Buckingham Palace, she highlighted a problem. A lot of well-meaning people simply don't know what a real korowai is. When the media came to Mark Sykes, then the Māori collection manager in our National Museum, he showed them the difference between korowai and kākahu. At the same time, Veranoa Hetet was hitting the New Zealand media to make the same point. She shared a very useful definition, which I have copied here for you. That a korowai is a specific type of cloak. Kākahu, quite simply, features hoka hoka. She also pointed out that a lot of people don't realise the incredible amount of work that goes into weaving a traditional kākahu. From harvesting the harakiki leaves, extracting the muka fibres with a mussel shell, applying the fibres on the weaver's leg before any weaving can begin, and then months and months of weaving the entire cloak by hand using a technique called weft twining. The hoka hoka, made from rolled flax fibre, were usually dyed black and arranged as the weaver chose. They gave the korowai its name from koro meaning loose and wai meaning water or flowing. Distinctive hoka hoka cascade down these garments, rippling and swaying with the wearer's every movement. The most important message to take from my part of this conversation is that hoka hoka are the essential elements of a korowai, but there are two more points. Different arrangements or different types, give it a different name. Korowai is not an alternative name for a cloak. It's an entire class of cloaks. So from that, I'm wanting to show you some of the cloaks included in that class. And here we are. This one's actually collected on the the Russian expedition in 1820. Undyed hoka hoka, and so this is called a hihi-ma. If they're arranged to fall in vertical lines, it becomes a whakahiti heke or a tahi heke. On the left, you see a simple form, but on the right, a very special example in the Nelson Provincial Museum collection, where Hamawera Manuhera is also seeking to expand knowledge of te reo. And I urge you to go online to try and find this because it's got a fascinating story. If the hoka hoka are arranged in squares, it becomes a korowai and I'm losing my words now, kuiri. If they're in blocks, a korowai koimutu. These might signify regional names. If the hoka hoka are scraped and dyed cylindrical strips of the harakeke leaf, they're pōkini, and it becomes a korowai korirangi that will rattle as the wearer moves. If the hoka hoka look as though they're unraveling, this will be a korowai kariri. This is my favorite korowai. It's in the Field Museum, and it might have been called a korowai nore. But the nore is so well hidden that people will only have seen flashes of red as the wearer moved. The korowai wahino had black tassels on a black ground, so this might have been an example. But given the problems with traditional black dye, I'm unsure whether any have actually survived. Korowai momutu had looped tassels, and there are bound to be many other names that have been lost. I don't have a problem when introduced materials are used with traditional techniques. One of the major changes that colonialism brought with it was the introduction of a cash economy. So weavers didn't have the same time to prepare fibers. Plus, they were also interested in exploring the potential of new materials. But I do have a problem with New Zealand universities promoting the wearing of fake cloaks and using the wrong terminologies. You can see here, they're talking about korowai and showing something else. So my last slide, I leave you with these images from Trade Me for a korowai for a few minutes before I hand over to Ata Te Kanawa. Where are the hoka hoka? Black screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. That's fantastic. So many names for so many korowai.
And that's probably only skimming the surface.
It probably is. Ata, would you like to pick up now, please?
Yes. Kia ora anō e te whānau. Kia ora anō. So this korowai featured in this graphic is actually made or was made by Te Rongo Pāmama, also seen in this image, and she's my great-grandmother. It's probably at least 150 years old, and sadly we don't have it in our collection, but that's a whole nother story requiring a whole lot of time. And then obviously the images include my grandmother and my mother. I should at this stage make a disclaimer that I'm not a weaver. I was surrounded by weaving, obviously, but I did not pick up weaving, the art form of weaving. I have tried to weave words in my past. I've been a publisher, and my involvement with supporting the legacy, Mum, Nana and Te Rongo's legacy, has been in republishing her Weaving a Kākahu book. We're up to a 3rd edition, and but more so actually being an advocate for maintaining and respecting taonga te kuiho. And so that's really passionate for me. So I see that, and you know, like if anyone comes away from tonight not knowing the difference between kākahu and korowai, then we should be concerned. But kākahu is the overarching name for the different types of Māori cloaks and the generic kupu for clothes in general. Korowai is, as you've heard Patricia say, a specific cloak, and it's technically different from others, and it's fallen victim to misuse, the kupu, and a gross misunderstanding of taonga. So I'm an advocate. Anyone that knows me knows that I've been an advocate for this, and it really more strongly in the last 3 or 4 years when we've seen a proliferation of artificial squares, cloaks, posing as korowai, and this does nobody any favours, least of all our tupuna who worked so hard to create these majestic cloaks. So that's sort of my introduction. So I've just got some points here that I want to speak to. So we have a private collection in the Waikato Museum. It spans 5 generations of our one family, and thanks to Mum having the insight to establish a relationship with the Waikato Museum to be the kaitiaki, a lot of our, well, most of the collection is there, of course, for obvious reasons. People that have stayed at our house have been both amused and shocked to wake up and see a kakahu draped over a piece of furniture at the end of the bed. So Mum obviously realised they needed a safe place to be stored, and we are indebted to the Waikato Museum for our relationship. I have told a journalist or two that we have arguably the largest private collection of cloaks in the world. The first journalist I told that to resisted that claim. So I invited her to find somewhere in the middle of, let's say, South America, where you have a family, one family with 5 generations dedicated and committed to maintaining this art form. So it's in my blood, and I'm looking forward to Hinekura talking more specifically about DNA, and yeah, so that's so I'm looking forward to hearing that again. It's really cool. So with the urban shift from the rural areas to the city in the early 1950s, Mum and Nana became concerned about the art form being lost. So they were founding members of the Māori Women's Welfare League, and teamed up with them and said, look, we are concerned about this. We are willing to teach and to share our knowledge and our skills. And they maintained that, actually. They maintained that throughout. And so that's, thanks to that, I think we now have quite a comfortable number of weavers in Aotearoa. And certainly the fear that the art form, traditional Māori arts, traditional Māori weaving, the fear that it would be lost is no longer. In 1973, Ngāpuna Waihanga, the Māori Artists and Writers, was formed. Mum was also a founding member of that, and we would meet annually. And it's only now that I realise, and I don't think we realised then at the time, the bigger picture of what it was. Like, I think we just thought it was a feel good to catch up with everyone, to check in with everyone. But now, since it's gone, I really lament the fact that we don't have these elite Māori artists meeting every year, bringing others through, like knowing the new ones that were coming up, that are coming through, nurturing them. And I want to say, keeping an eye on things, keeping an eye on what's authentic, what was being created with integrity, taonga te koeho, right through all the disciplines. So it was really sad to see Ngāpuna Waihanga become victim to another government system of funding, and anyway, that kind of spelt its demise. Some of the people in Ngāpuna Waihanga were also involved in Tui Iho, which was the Māori trademark of quality and authenticity. In fact, most of us were Ngāpuna Waihanga people under the guise of Paki Harrison and Jacob Scott, all those sorts of people got together, managed to get some funding from Creative New Zealand, who were keen in 2007, but it was only 2 years later that they decided to disinvest. That was the term. So they pulled the plug on that, and then some of us did a bit of a haka, and so we got some money from, I don't know, TPK, I think, and tried to get it going again. It was like world leading at the time, but then we had a bit of a haka between us, and so now it sits under Elizabeth Ellis, who does still use it, but it's nowhere near at the stage we intended it to be. And I wonder too, had it survived and been what we intended it to be, would we have this proliferation of product that is not great quality and definitely not authentic? And then following on from that, in Miramora, I was a co-founder of Miramora, the Indigenous Māori Fashion Apparel Board, and that came about because New Zealand Fashion Week, where the founder, Dame Peter Stewart, was looking to have a point of difference at fashion weeks around the world. And the other founder, Rex Turnbull, and I, we were getting concerned about the Māori fashion shows that were there were kind of treated as if they were novelty status. And we were concerned that we didn't want to be in that space. We actually wanted to be in the high fashion space like everyone else, called the hui just to express our concerns and to make ourselves available. Should they consider, the organisers consider going down that track, they should just like let us know, and somehow we would find the Māori fashion designers. Anyway, Pierre attended the meeting and just told us in a very matter-of-fact way, this is what I've been looking for, this is what I know to give us the point of difference around the world, so this is what you're going to do. You're going to have a competition and I'll give you a spot at New Zealand Fashion Week. And that was, so we showed first there in 2009 and have shown consecutively since then, apart from the COVID years. But we set out to create a platform for Māori fashion designers, and it was a given that a lot of them would reference their culture for design, inspiration, and execution was really great. A lot of them are coming through the Māori through the design schools, which we had built a really good relationship with and maintain actually. And we do encourage Māori fashion designers to do that disciplinary stuff, to learn about structure, to not just depend on knit fabric and draping and that sort of thing. And we're seeing this starting to emerge. I've got to say, signs of cannibalism where they are copying each other. There's a lot of stamping of culture going on. I'm not saying this is bad, but I'm saying that this is what we're seeing a lot of. So this has had highlights. I have to say, a really good example of where cultural inspiration was a designer from Tūwhare Toa presented a collection of, so it was all white, so it was white organza on white knit and white cotton, and it had pin tucking. And so the reference was the thermal stations. The pin tucking was all the piping. The organza was the steam. The drill was sort of the the industry representative of it. So it was beautiful stories told, well executed garments, and we were in our happy place. This has started to become less common now because, and in their defense, they had to become commercially viable. So a lot of our beautiful designers moved from that creative space because of commercial reasons. It was obviously more viable for them to churn out garments that was easier to produce. So yeah, and then we're seeing also under the term contemporary, almost like a free license to use Māori iconology as something they can then attach taonga status, and that's where we see the total disconnect. So yeah, I've been on a bit of a bandwagon and started off saying, identifying that what they were doing was just using the kupu incorrectly, but it's a lot more than that. And of course, you know, you get some resistance to that and get some what we call haters. But you know, that's just, you'd be naive to be able to speak out and call people out without expecting to shoulder some of that. So yeah, using kupuraranga, that was sort of my main concern in the beginning, but more recently I've become really concerned about our mokopuna growing up and actually believing these aqua feathered, tape trimmed fabrics are taonga and are korowai or are kākahu. And last week I had lunch with some people, and I was saying I was going to be doing this korero, and you know, I've been a bit sort of anti the faux cloaks, and this woman said, "Oh, you're talking about the mikakahus," and I was like, "The what?" She said, "Mikakahus, you know, like McDonald's. It's accessible. It's not fine dining, but it's a disposable, it's affordable, and all that sort of thing." So that was the first time I've heard that, but I sort of think it's probably bang on in this social environment and in our society in 2023. So so that's me. I just want to thank the organisers, Doris in particular. You wrote to me last year, and I was a bit busy or something. So thank you for not giving up and getting back in touch. Really appreciate it, and hopefully somebody is you know, learn stuff along the way. That's all we can hope for. Yeah. Kia ora.
No, thank you for being part of the conversation. You're probably not done yet. There'll be some questions for you, I'm sure. And you know, but let's move on to Hinakura, if you would, please. Hinakura, would love to hear from you now, if you wouldn't mind.
Kia ora ata. Tēnā kōrua, Patricia, kōrua ko ata. It's an honor really to be able to, you know, literally pick up the threads of this conversation and take it forward. And so Patricia, you know, has identified the problem, and ata brings this, you know, this whakapapa of taonga tuku iho, you know, intergenerationally transmitted knowledge. So I want to really to start with my positionality, that I am, even to say the word weaver doesn't sit right with me. I'm a kaiwhatu, I am a kairaranga, I am a kairangahau. So I am a weaver of cloaks, I am a weaver of flax for our international audience. I am a researcher, I am a teacher, and I am a speaker of Te Reo Māori. And none of those things was I born with. All of those things, of course, are learnt My reo has been learnt as a second language learner. We did not have any kairaranga or kaiwhatu weavers in our family, and so my mum sought out opportunities for me to learn, to go and learn. My very first kaiako was my whanaunga Judy Robson-Dean from Ahipara. And I'd say, you know, learning is a humbling experience. You get it wrong a lot of the time. And I think that, you know, I want to plant that seed that when we are doing something wrong or saying or using a word that is not correct, let's say that some people find it easy to say that's not correct rather than that's wrong. When it's not correct, that we're actually open to the idea that, oh, sorry, yeah, I didn't know that. But can you tell me more? Or can you tell me why that happens? Or can you tell me why that why the word that I'm using is not correct? And so I just begin with a little story of a 18-year-old who left high school and went to university, and there were no Māori prizes at the senior prize giving. There was, you could be the top math scholar or the top English scholar or whatever at her high school, but there was nothing for Māori students back in the mid-90s. And so she wanted to make something that would be a Māori, make the Māori students proud, you know, and to be able to stand up on stage with the rest of the non-Māori students in the school. And so she made what she called a korowai, which was an old curtain, and somebody gifted her some korero feathers, and she was really good at cross-stitch, so she cross-stitched this pattern, this Māori pattern that she'd seen, and she sewed that onto the curtain, and she sewed on the feathers, and she actually even sewed on some huka, so perhaps according to some of our definitions, there was some allusion to it being a korowai. And she presented what she called the korowai. She named it. She called it Te Aka Ki Kahurangi, which means to ascend to the highest possible reaches that you can go. And she gifted that korowai back to the school, and it was presented every year right up until this day, 32 years later, to the top Māori student of that school. Now that 18-year-old learnt very quickly that is not called a korowai, because someone came up to her and said, "What's that crap that you made? That's an old curtain, and that's not a korowai." Okay, well, what is it then? Well, I don't know what it is, but it's not a korowai. So this 18-year-old, who, if you haven't figured out by now, is now 47-year-old, learned that, okay, so what I'd seen is being the symbol of pride and identity. I was using the wrong name for that. So I was determined to go and find out what that meant. And that led me on a journey of going from the curtain to learning how to do raranga, to learning how to whatu, all interwoven with my te reo journey and ultimately my identity journey. So I want to take this conversation in a slightly different way, and for us to consider for a moment, why do we have this problem? Why do we have the problem of different kakahu or whatu kakahu being given this generic name of korowai? Why do we have, fake fur being called korowai and the whole commercialization? And I suggest that it's almost, in some ways, it's a good problem, because it's almost, for me, it's rooted in this real pride in being Māori. For our whānau who are buying kakahu, who are sewing the curtain, for the nanny that's getting the rows of feathers and stitching them on and giving them to her mokopuna, when he graduates from his primary school, it's about a pride and identity. And I think that's really important. There's something there that we want to hold on to. However, as Patricia and Nata have both referenced tonight, we've got this explosion and this commercialization and commodification of this Māori identity symbol, and that's an issue, of course. So we need to roll it back. So my contribution tonight is to really think about what do we lose when we are not talking about these taonga and this, which is something precious or treasure, and the practice that goes with this taonga. What do we lose when we simplify it and call all of these cloaks korowai? So the image that we have here, I'm going to talk about the Whatu terminology and its connection to Māori maternities. There's a couple of my mates on here, they know that this is one of my favourite things to talk about, and was actually the core of my PhD research that storied the lives of 8 Māori mothers and grandmothers. And as I taught them how to weave whatu kākahu as heirloom cloaks for their families, they told stories about what it is to live as Māori women. And we, as a collective, you know, we talked about the deeply held maternal nature of whatu kākahu. So for our internationals, kākahu again is this broad generic term for clothing, and of course pretty much all of our clothing would have been called kākahu back in the day. Whatu kākahu I use as a term to describe cloaks that have been made through the practice of whatu or finger twining, or as Patricia talked about, weft twining. Now, we may not have all carried children ourselves. We may have tāne, we may have men in our audience here, but we've certainly all been carried by our mothers and indeed our grandmothers, which we're going to get to. So I know we've got some very experienced kai whatu on here. This is going to be sucking eggs for you, but for the rest of us, if we look at the vertical, what are called the warp threads, which go from top to bottom, the Māori word for those is whenu, which is a conjunction or a shortening of the word whenua. Whenua being land. That the land that sustains us. Whenua also being the Māori word for placenta, that very important thing that sustains us while we are in vitro when our mothers are carrying us. The weft threads that run from, this is how I always remember it, from white to weft, right? That go across the kākahu, the weft threads. A word for those is aho. Another word, and aho is another word for iho, or the umbilical cord that connects us to our babies when we are sustaining them. The amniotic sac that we carry our babies in as mothers is called a kahu, and it's a kahu of protection, which is a shortening of the word ka kahu. So I take up this idea that when we are hapu or when we are pregnant with our babies, we are already cloaking them in a kahu, in a kākahu, before they enter the world. Left-hand photo, the whitest baby with the reddest hair in the world to the Māori mother, right? And then the next one, my mum wearing the very first kākahu that I made, going back probably nearly 15 or 20 years ago. And then on the right-hand side there, my youngest daughter, who's now nearly 15, engaging with the kākahu that I'm weaving at that time, playing with that whenu. And I wanted to talk about this with this idea that the deeply embedded maternal nature of whatu kākahu with the whenu, the warp threads, the aho, the weft threads, the idea that the kākahu is also connected to our maternities. The fact that the whatu and weaving sits within te wharepora, and the ancestress of that, or the goddess, I guess, is Hine te Iwa, who is also the goddess of birth. The poles that traditionally would have held up a kākahu when a woman was weaving it are called ngā turuturu a Hine te Iwa, the poles of Hine te Iwa, which in some places also doubled as the birthing poles. So back in those days, none of the silly lie down on a bed when in the most ridiculous position to give birth to a baby. You know, you would squat and you would hold onto this pole, and that would help with the birthing. So this is really just a very quick way of highlighting that when we start to talk about threads and strands and cloaks and everything's a korowai, we begin to, well, we don't begin to lose it, we completely dismiss the very deeply held embedded knowledge that sits within the reo in the language. Now, if I could see the whole screen, which I can't, I would ask those of you who are weavers to put your hand up if you wish you could have learnt your rāranga or whatu practice in a te reo Māori space, in te reo Māori. And whether your camera's on or not, just have a think about that. In my more than 25 years of experience, I've never come across a kaiwhatu or a weaver who has said, no, I'm much happier having learnt all of this deeply held Māori knowledge and practice in English. Because we know that as kaina pohatu Māori academic, these are two of some of my favourite quotes, that an unwillingness to properly value the potential held within Māori bodies of knowledge, such as whatu and rāranga, deposited by generations past into the library of te reo, will have the effect of limiting our visions, horizons, and so expectations. And so I suggest here that when we say that all cloaks are korowai, that we have drastically and detrimentally reduced the ways that we understand and engage and think about these, as Ata has talked about, these taonga tukuiho, these heirlooms that have been passed down to us. Kaina pohatu also talks about that reflecting on possibilities within Māori thinking and the energies expended by earlier generations, taking us back to our tupuna times, then locating courage to adjust these options for use in each new time. So I think as whether we are interested in fashion, museum collections, arts practice, teaching, hauora, well-being, all of these elements that are deeply entwined and woven together, we constantly tussle with this idea of what do we bring through that is traditional, what values and beliefs and aspirations, or that aho matua, that main thread that brings us through, and how do we locate those in our contemporary times. So here's just an idea. Here's some suggestions. Actually, I'll just pause for a moment just to talk about a beautiful piece of rangahau that we have running at the moment, which is working with 40 Māori medium whānau who have their children in Māori medium education. And for a year, we worked with this whānau, some of them are on screen, kia ora, my friend Jamie, and with their children as well. And when we were in class working with these young people who are all Māori language speakers, they were, and most of them te reo Māori is their first language, they were creating instructions and language in te reo Māori that we hadn't heard before. I was like, so kei taha, what am I doing at the moment? And I was doing the practice, and they were saying, oh, you're fine, you're doing nothing, oh, kei te tākaina koe i te whenu mai te aho, kei te piri mai. Well, they were saying that they were coming up with language and descriptions in te reo Māori. So, while we bring this tupuna knowledge through, I think there's an important part of how our young people and our next generation are going to pick up that knowledge and bring their language through with that. So just a couple of, sorry, they haven't formatted that well, but here we go. So we've got some brief definitions here. We've got a kākahu, which is clothing or cloak. I don't know about you, but when I think of cloak, I think of that hooded thing sort of, I don't know, going through a dark forest. But anyway, sometimes you have to be able to translate these things, for an English-speaking audience. And then we've got in Patricia's presentation was beautiful because we had lots of different images here, but we have a kahuhuruhuru, which is a feathered cloak. And I don't want any hard case fellas that's not from the north telling me huruhuru is a different kind of hairs on your body, because some of us in different iwis understand huruhuru in a different way, but we'll leave that one for the chat afterwards. And then you've got the other descriptions like a kahukiwi, makes sense. A kahukuri, it's telling us what that is. The way that I use some of these descriptions, as I said before, fatu kakahu, kakahu should be, is a cloak made using the practice of fatu. A kakahu owaha is owaha, it's a strange word, but it's been taken up to talk about being creative or a contemporary cloak. So I'm suggesting that a sewn cloak is called a sewn cloak. And that's where we leave it. A sewn cloak is a sewn cloak. So we can talk about this idea of it being Māori inspired, of it being, referencing Māori patterns or whatever else. But really, at its very basis, it is Māori inspired. And I just want to finish on just the last 2 points. Is that in our practice, with the community that we work with, we start by teaching them how to make fatu kakahu owaha. So if you just have a look at our definitions, they are using the contemporary materials, but they are learning the practice of fatu. And always the aspiration is that they're going on to use muka, and we get there with our community. And many of them have gone on to make their first fatu kakahu muka. Because muka as a natural fibre is capable of taking up the DNA of the weaver. So as Patricia described and Ata, every single one of those strands is rolled down the weaver's leg. Their DNA is literally bound into all of those 2,000 strands. And just think for a moment that the idea that my great-grandchild will put on a muka kakahu that has my DNA rolled into it and that will lay against their skin is just the most beautiful thought. Now, a sewn cloak, even the old Keating, is not capable of taking up that DNA. And the last point that I want to leave with is that fatu kakahu take time, and it is the aroha and the love that is given in that time, in that creation, that is the most important thing. Our stunning Toi Māori scholar, Donna Campbell, and one of my dear friends will talk about fatu kakahu as bringing you closer to our tupuna, to be able to sit and practice and to practice fatu the way that our tupuna did for hundreds and hundreds of years, brings us closer to our tupuna. Nā reira, koto katoa, our community of practice that we've had for many years is called Fatu Ora, and it's been taken up as a greeting and a farewell. So when we want to say hello or goodbye to some of our mates, we say Fatu Ora kia tātou. Nā reira, koto i te iwi, tēnā koto katoa, Fatu Ora kia tātou.
Thank you, Hinakura. Now, I'd like perhaps before we go to a general sort of question session, I don't know if Ata, Patricia, and Hinakura, whether you would like to share something yourselves about what you've said, perhaps some I suppose sort of areas where you meet, or where some reflections on what you've each shared.
No, I just think I've got a lot to think about.
Well, I think that's probably true for all of us, Patricia. Yeah, go on, Asa.
The only other thing I wanted to add that I thought may or may not be interesting is when Pieter gave us the opportunity to take a show of Māori fashion designers to New Zealand Fashion Week, we had to quickly come up with a name. So the name Middle Morda, middle is obviously from Raranga, and Morda is just Italian for fashion. And we wanted to have an essence in a Raranga, but also have an international, this is a bit silly, but Middle Morda, it's totally made up. Turn the letters around, and actually, coincidentally, it also spells Māoridom. Did not realize that when we were putting it together. And also Mod Māori, so this is kind of funny. I'm sorry, this is all being a bit silly, but yeah. No, I'm kind of interested to see if anyone's got any questions.
I think my only sort of reminder again, you know, Doris, is as you said at the beginning, that this is just a very thin, you know, slice into the thinking. So, you know, I think it's for all of us, it's about so what do we do? So what do we do now? You know, we've got this, we've got this hint of knowledge, we've got this idea. What do we do? And I actually, I was going to say, when I had those, I almost feel like, you know, we need to have a little kete of responses to people, and to be able to say, you know, someone says, oh, look at my lovely korowai, you know, rather than me go, oh, rolling my eyes, and that's not a korowai. You know, how is it that we can sort of collectively come up with responses, that we have a little practice and say, well, actually. So and I don't have the answers to that, because I'm a bit of an eye roller or a scroll past, because as Ata said, and I think I saw my friend Paula Rigby on here as well, we've been pushing back on this for years, and you get some very some very sensitive, you know, fragilities come through, and understand that, you know, for example, there's you know, someone, I won't name it. There's a business that sells sewn, what she calls sewn korowai, and the response was, well, if I don't call them korowai, people won't know what they are, and my business will fold. That's one response, you know. Or another response being, you know, don't tell me what it is, or what it might. Well, my nanny always called it a korowai. Well, I'm sorry, but that's wrong, you know. So there's different ways that we can respond, but we all need to do it together, and we need to be conscious consumers in a very capitalist, commercialized world. I'm interested to hear some questions.
I think that's indeed a very interesting question in the first place. I've been thinking about this in this, you know, in the period of thinking about this conversation, and you know, how I suppose you can offer people a way to talk about them that gives them sort of honor, and makes them beautiful and desirable, but named in a way that that is more appropriate to what they are, and what they're, you know, so what their purpose is, how they're made, and yeah, so for their place, because I see them too as a symbol of pride, and people expressing their identity, a way that they want to do that, and it's a way that but let's give them a beautiful name.
I think they certainly do need their own name, and I think that we have to get on with this, because it's not just going to be korowai. The things on Trade Me are now, another lot are now starting to be called kahu or manu huru huru, and they are stitched on cloth. So I think that the sooner some kind of way of acknowledging them for what they are is achieved, the better, because we have to be realistic and realize they aren't actually going to go away. So let's try and have a decent name.
Can I just talk a little bit about the whakapapa of the korowai? Go back to around the 1820s, and a certain number of cloaks came out of caves and things like that. What they looked like was that they had evolved from rain capes, and rain capes have a whole lot of different names just in the class of rain cape, just as the cloaks themselves, like kai taka pai pai roa, all of those names were existing as recently as Te Aho Tapu exhibition, which were quite well known at that time, and that's not that long ago. So it looked to me, looking at these ones and ones in the British Museum and places like that, that the korowai evolved from rain capes that had frayed, and the tags had become muka from wear. And muka, when it does that, it rolls itself into a single S twist tag. And that would have been a more comfortable cloak to wear. So if you can picture hongi hika in a red cloak, and that cloak has 3 types of tags. It has single rolled tag, twined, two-stranded twined tags, and it has karere, which is 3-stranded rolled a different way, so that the way that it wants to roll is it resists and it sort of opens up. So they had started to become decorative by that time. And the korowai itself seems to have evolved really strongly from about the 1800s on. I'm not sure whether, if you think of Cook's illustrators illustrating who's standing in the waka and what they're wearing. I don't know if you see a korowai, do you, Patricia?
I haven't seen korowai, and I know here I know that Mead has said there is one, and I've hunted and I can't find what he thinks, which one he is identifying. There is a drawing by Weber.
Yes.
You know the image, the painting that's in Te Papa of Queen Charlotte Sound, and there's a group, there's a cluster of 3 people in the middle. Well, he actually made a sketch in 1777, and and that was at the spot, and he didn't work it up into a painting until 10 years later. You can't see anything definitive in the painting, but in the sketch, you can actually see what I think is a fringe at the neck, and possibly hoka as well. And it's something I had planned to include, but I was having too many slides. So I will send that one to you.
Well, by the time
That's
that Angus comes through in 1840s, there are a lot of korowai. And the korowai has evolved to include ngore, so the wool and replacing the red feathers. It's also got a lot of embroidery influence. So you start to get the pāheke and a whole lot of things going on in the cloaks, which are the response of young Māori women being taught to make samplers and taught to sew, and being taught all these other sort of ways of decorating in a way a surface of a cloak, rather than just feathers or just rain, like tags. And so those things start to come together in the cloak. The korowai, I think, evolved as the cloak that wasn't so status as a kaitaka or a paipairoa. It was the cloak that you could innovate on and you could play around with. And it wasn't taking anything from it, it was adding to it. So it became like a big sampler. And when I learned from Digger, in your tauira or sampler, you could put all the sorts of things you needed to learn, and it was a way of keeping feather attachment, tag attachment, tānako, mawhiti, which has come across from the from the embroidery aspect, and pāheke, the running threads and all of that. They could also go into your tauira. So in a way, the korowai had evolved to keep all of those techniques alive in one cloak. As people wove less, they could keep all of those techniques going by putting them all into one cloak. And the cloak that they put it into was the tagged cloak, and then it just kept the name korowai as it evolved, as it got feathers, as it got those beautiful little tānako things that Digger did. She still could refer to that as a korowai.
It's got hoka.
Even if it didn't have hoka, as that one didn't.
Oh, the
And-
one I've got in my mind's eye did, but that's okay. It's
Oh,
one with
I
green
think I'm
feathers, I
thinking
think.
of the one that has those diamond-shaped,
All right.
and it also has feathers.
Started to bring some pictures. Yes.
So to me, it's just that
About
you have to start inventing new words. So what do we call what people make now, the little short capes? What's the name for those?
well, I
Do we
had
have?
Sorry?
I know this is a question that you've been asking, Patricia, and I don't know
Yes.
the answer to it.
Well, I've always thought that when, I like the quote of Colenso about Maori having numerous garments and all with their own names, and I think I've got it here somewhere, but I can't bring it up. A kahu, a garment, all garments of which they had a great and varied number, all bearing proper names. And it was important to them in those.
They're all in Williams if you want to look for them. There's
I
heaps of
know.
them. Yeah.
That takes a long time to find.
And we don't know exactly because there aren't any pictures. We don't exactly
and
know.
sometimes there are cloaks that we've got names. Well, no, we've got names, but we don't know what it looked like.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. But I think the newer cloak, the newer short cloaks, the traveling cloaks that people are wearing or making now, I think they deserve a new name. And when I started trying to learn te reo with Huarangi Waikere Puru, whose name I couldn't even say, I remember him saying, ask yourself what it does. And so if I was a linguist, I might be able to answer that question. And I think there must be people in Toi Māori or various other forum that have access to people with those language skills. I think we should be able to create new names. Sorry.
There's people right here who can respond to that, And I think
So we're asking, can you respond and tell us what you call those?
Oh yeah, no, and I think I can even see in the chat that some people have put some things up there. Kei te mihi atu ki a koe, whaia Maureen, from your experience, and I think I pick up on this idea that our tupuna were inventive and innovative and adaptive, and they were very fashionable. So when wool came along, of course, they were adding wool, and when tapestry came along, so there's I think me personally, I don't take the position of completely, disregarding anything that's not right or that's not right, but it all raises interesting conversations that we need to keep engaging with, and then I'm going to say it again, in this very capitalist commercialized space, because the idea that you can buy a kahu huruhuru, and I'm going to call it a kahu huruhuru, Patricia, because it's not a whatu kahu huruhuru. It's not made by the practice of whatu. For $450, and it's taken half an hour or 40 or an hour, whatever, to sew. Is the commercialization of these inspired practices, yes. Right? And so it's cheaper and it's more accessible, and it has those elements to it for whānau that may not have, they'll say, well, we don't have any of those traditions or that skill in our family. Well, I'd be really blunt and say, go and find it. I had to go and find it. A lot of us had to go and find it. If it's our reo, you go and find it. If it's our rāranga and whatu, then you go and find it, and you ask and you ask, and you make those spaces available to people. I would much rather teach you how to make a whatu kakahu than make one for you. Because I hate doing that. So, because I'm not connected to it. I'm not connected to the kakahu that's being made. But I think the idea is that our practice of creating whatu kakahu is no longer in danger. We go back to, Ata was talking about with her mum and her nan, our practice was in danger of being lost, and that intergenerational transmission being cut off. However, I think we've only done half the job by now having our practice alive and well, that we can create a product at the end, we're missing out on being engaged in the knowledge and critically, as we're talking about tonight, the language that's involved in the process. So moving from this idea of product at the end, what it's made of, what it's called, that there's the whole process and engagements, and those that have sat around and done fatu before, you know, you sit there with your mates or your sister or whatever, and you're yarning away and you're crying and you're moaning about your husband and, you know, price of petrol and all that sort of thing. So there's a whole lot of stuff that's happening, as well as what's produced at the end. And you know, we don't get that in a machine sewing cloak that's taken half an hour that your wife trained me.
I just want to just touch on that also. I think there's a huge opportunity for teaching and believing that a lot more people are becoming more discerning about what they're getting, you know, like for all of us learning today, or, you know, there's spin-off everywhere, and this is another area. Like if I was to look put my branding hat on, when we're looking at garment or product, and so we would be looking like the categories of machine made, hand woven, made with love, handmade. But one thing that I learned tonight was woven with DNA, and that is spectacular. Like it's right out there, and everything else is in the opposite direction. So I think there's a really good opportunity to turn people on to authenticity, and a really not being around to keep an eye on us as a community, because that's what we used to. We didn't even realize what our purpose was then, and that's really sad. But I think there's lots of people, because the thing with these contemporary cloaks, they've actually become very, very common.
Yes.
And we go back to just girl language. No girl actually wants to go to a function where there's 3 or 4 replicas of what you're wearing. So there's risk with that from I'm just, you know, like commercially, there's risk with that from a fashion aspect, and it will gradually cheapen the product itself. So I think the opportunity to turn young people on to raranga and weaving their DNA through it for their mokopuna is quite attractive. I might
Very
be just
special.
There's a question here about, you know, how we can progress this conversation and different responses that we can have, and I'd like to suggest that there isn't one. You know, there's some of us who are writers, so we're writing about it and publishing. There are some of us who are teaching, and so we need to be, you know, continually upskilling ourselves and teaching these. There are some who are in you know, in all these other different intersecting spaces, and I think there isn't one answer, but we all, I think there is definitely an individual and a collective responsibility for us to be moving this on, because as the commercialization grows, and we're talking about global commercialization now, you know, you get images going all around the world, and people seeing something and go, oh, I like the look of that on Insta, Pickgram, whatever it's called, you know, I want to make something like that, and there's no connection to it. And so you can have people who even people who are learning fatu online can live on the other side of the world and never actually even have come to Aotearoa, but have knowledge of these practices. So genie's out of the bottle, e te whānau, you know, we're not putting that genie back in the bottle, but we do need to think about how we control the genie, I guess.
I think you make a really interesting point, and one of the things I was thinking when I was looking for the right images to use in my presentation and looking at all these pictures of, quote, korowai, and thinking in my head, how long will it be before we see them on that site called, I think it's Temu, made in China? You know what I'm saying? That what's to stop some international outfit copying that same practice of stitching them somewhere overseas? That's a worry. The whole commodification of the culture is a worry.
That's a reality, and when they're easily replicated, that's the risk you take.
Yes.
So that definitely could happen.
So we've got
But
I
that's-
have
But for
some
those
with
of
their
us
hand up.
that are staunch to the real deal, that's not as much a threat to us.
No.
So I have some with their hand up. Are we happy to take a question?
You can try.
Good. Okay. Way you go, Waiteri.
Kia ora tātou. Ko Janea taku ingoa, no Ngāti Manipoto ahau. I was just wondering if we could possibly, like, talking about one of the things that struck me was the Mick Kakaru, was it McDonald's analogy, and I was wondering if maybe if we had more, I don't know if it's mātauranga or knowledge around the value system of our tupuna, and what they considered to be what elevated mana in different kākahu. And that information be like a draw card for authenticity. So I'm not sure if I'm making sense actually, but I've learnt that there's things like the difficulty of construction, the difficulty of, or the rarity of materials that afforded mana or value to our different taonga. And so, I don't know, maybe in conversations moving forward with that, I suppose with that Makaku concept, explaining why something that's so in versus something that, you know, the value system that our tupuna had, or the whakapapa that we share with harakeke, or, you know, for those sorts of things that might be a draw card for, I think I heard you say, the younger generation to want to buy in or learn about those sorts of techniques. I'm not sure if that's a question. I don't know. I'm just here for
just know that Mikaka who wasn't me, although
no,
I
definitely not.
It. And I know people in this 21st century understand it's derogatory. But yeah, but if we look at that, we look at the McDonald's concept and how it is easily accessible. It's disposable, it's affordable, and all those sorts of things. So it has a value system, right? You know, $10, it's a value, satisfies our need. When we look at perhaps making as a whānau, collectively making a kākahu, gathering the harakeke off your whenua, you know, you got like a richness, a status there, right there. It's off your whenua or your, you know, your hapu iwi. And then what Hinekura says, then you start working with it and you're rubbing the muka up against your skin and you got your DNA going in there like that. There's class, right? And I think young people will get that. Well, I'm not saying that old people wouldn't, but I think that gives it like an edge, you know, like It just makes it sexy, makes it a really attractive product made with DNA, as opposed to originated in China, made from plastic, you know. It's easy to compare the so
It gives it mana.
now I'm going to sound like a car salesman, but we actually sell a book, Weaving a Kākahu. There are other books around. So kia ora anyway.
Can I add on to that, Ata, and just to respond with an example, e hoa to your, which I think is an important idea, you know, that we talk about intergenerational, you know, passing down intergenerational knowledge, that we have to bring our tamariki with us. And back in the day, tamariki would have been around most of that time, not for that beginning part, that aho tapu, but they would have been around. So with our whatuora whānau, our kids are there, from our little kids up to our rangatahi, and you can bet that those kids see their mums and their dad and their auntie and all their whānau sitting there for months and months creating these kākahu. And in fact, they'll even say, oh, you know, mama, me tāpiri atu te tai, you know, mawhiro, I want some pink in my tāniko, you know. And so they're informing, and when you see these tamariki put these kākahu on, and the way that they walk around with them, that's I just want to share that example of this idea of, you know, the mana that goes into it. And I would also add that they're experiencing and they're seeing that aroha, and the aroha is time, and the time that their whānau are sitting there creating these kākahu in these busy lives that we have. You know, there was that picture there of my daughter Kahukura, and she will pick up whatu and rāranga. I think she will, because when she was young, I used to take her everywhere, and then she wanted to hang out with me, but I realized that it wasn't about her doing the harakeke and rāranga with me, it was her spending time with me, because mama's always busy. So I think it's this idea of aroha, and, you know, the mana and these whatu kākahu are the expression of aroha in the time that it takes to sit there and to, you know, to create whakarohia, the waihanga tēnei.
I did have another question actually for you, Hinekura. What was, I heard you say kākahu was it auaha?
Yeah, that's a word that we picked up probably a good 10 years ago. You know, auaha can mean creative, or we picked it up as this idea of contemporary. It kind of half sits with me, I guess, you know, with this idea for contemporary, but then we could even have a great debate about what does contemporary mean anymore, you know. I think if I can leave something behind, it's that when we are describing different types of kākahu, kahu, huru, korowai, kahukuri, that when I talk about whatu kākahu, I'm talking about cloaks that have been made through the practice of whatu. Through the practice of.
So with kākahu auaha, what is that referring to? The contemporary material but traditional technique?
So whatu, we've used the term whatu kākahu auaha. So made kākahu that are made with whatu, if we want to use the word traditional technique, and auaha being the contemporary material. So whether that's jute or, you know, cotton.
Oh yeah, cool. Thank you. Kia ora tātou.
Right. Can I just ask Ata and Patricia and Hinekura whether you are happy for us to wind up here? We've well and truly done our hour and a half.
I just see Taonga Huia's got a hand up. I'd like to answer any questions if I can.
All right, please. Taonga Huia, please.
Kia ora koutou, ko Taonga Huia aho no Ngāti Mania Potohuki. I'm definitely an advocate for this kaupapa and love it. Hinekura, you mentioned that probably some of the reasons why people are doing the contemporary cloaks is because they're proud of the heritage and want to include it in their lifestyles. So I have two thoughts. One is sometimes when you're going to hui, like graduations, you see people with some beautiful traditional kākahu who just don't know how to wear or don't know how to look after them. And then you have other families who don't have access to beautiful kākahu, so they can only afford something like this, but they want it as part of their child's lifestyle or graduation ceremony. And also, do we actually promote the use of kākahu Māori as well? Because you have Māori organisations who have Māori events promoting the wearing of white formal dress. So just some ideas for discussion.
No, good whakaaro. We kind of touched on this when we met up a couple of days ago, and you know, when I go back to the mid 90s and we were at university and stuff, you weren't allowed to wear a whatu kākahu, anything over your gown, and so it started. It sort of came as a side of protest, that you would put your you take your kākahu under your graduation thing, and then before you get to the stairs, you put your kākahu on, and then they couldn't get you. And there's been some people that have written about that. So this idea of this overlaying of my, you know, Māori identity over the top of this Western academic, you know, kind of thing. So, so you know, it kind of kicked off there. And then, of course, you know, we see all types of kākahu and whatu kākahu being worn. I guess, you know, one thought is that kākahu aren't the only way that we express our tuakiri Māori, our Māori identity. There's lots of ways that we do that. Used to be, you know, before that it was wearing what we called our bone carving. You know, back in the 80s when we were at school, you wear your bone carving, you weren't allowed to wear that either. They used to make you cut it off. You know, so yes, the wearing of kaku has become one of those symbols. I'm going to take it a step further, and I have a concern that it's becoming seen as a New Zealand identity symbol, and we need to be very cautious of that. That people say it's a New Zealand cloak, you know, that I'm in New Zealand, and so, you know, again we're reduced, and we lose some of that. I'm not saying that non-Māori can't or shouldn't wear whatu kākahu, but if the conversation starts to shift into it being a New Zealand identity symbol, I think there's something to be a bit concerned about there. You had another good point, Kari, that I've forgotten.
Was that the one about Māori organisations having Māori awards and encouraging formal black and white kākahu?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I haven't come across that. Gee. But but yeah, I mean, and I think the conversation that we're having about you know, feathered sewn feathered cloaks are mainly coming from Māori businesses. Now that's a hard thing for us to say, because we, you know, again, we're in this tussle between Māori entrepreneurship, Māori identity, the commercialization, the appropriate, you know, these are really complex things that there isn't really an answer to. So when it's our own, I think we have to be even more responsive to that. And, you know, at formal events, oh my God, black and white, that just seems funny. There was a good question in here about, you know, normalizing our whatu kākahu. So I get really hoha when I hear, you know, graduation cloak or a wedding, or, you know, those are worn at graduations and weddings. We want our tamariki, and at one of our kura, we've made a couple of whatu kākahu, so that the kaikarakia each morning puts on the kākahu, and the child stands up in there, you know, ka tū mai me tana mana katoa, he's proud as, and they stand up and they do the karakia. If they're going to do, if they're the, you know, the tauiro o te wiki, then they put the kākahu on. So, you know, we want them to be out and about. One of my whanaunga who was on here, you know, she talked about years ago wanting to make one so that when she goes to Pack and Save up in Kaitaia, she's got her whatu kākahu on, you know, let's get it out there. Like a little short kind of paki, you know. Yeah, sorry, I mean, I don't think any of these have answers, but they're really good for Karo to be having and thinking about how
I think a simple measurement is it plastic? You know, It's a simple choice whether you want to wear plastic. That's a simple measurement that anyone can assert too. It's a bit harsh, but that's kind of the way of our world now. So that's another good reason for whānau to work together to make their own authentic with material, with natural materials, you know.
There's been a couple of good comments that have come up about, you know, perhaps we need to come back to, you know, to our own whānau, to our hapu. My own whanaunga reminded me I've got to go home and get all, you know, get these kupu down, and away from the institutions. You know, that's a whole nother wānanga, I think, is how our knowledge has been taken up and, you know, in different institutions. There's a good one here that says, you know, that maybe we need to go back to a tribal way of teaching, and that should become our norm. And so, another good whakaaro.
I think it's a beautiful way to end. I think there's plenty more to be said. I think we should perhaps do this again. I'm really delighted with how many people have turned out to join us in this conversation. Yeah, and so if it's all right with you guys, I'd love to just wind it up, close it, and perhaps you could close for us, Henakura, with a karakia.
Just responding to one question there, ka pai. Tēnā tātou. Mua mai I te karakia me mihi ka tika kia koutou, kua noho mai mo tēnei neke atu I te kotai haore me te hawhi. Ka rere atu ngā mihi mai I tēnei motu o Hawaii ki Aotearoa, kia kōrua tahi I ngā tuakana ata, kōrua ko Patricia. Ara koutou ko Maureen, tēnā koe whai Maureen, kua roa te wā I a koe e mahi ana I tēnei kaupapa, tēnei au ka mihi atu kia koe hoki Doris, nāui whakahaere I tēnei o ngā koro I tēnei pō. Nā reira, kia koutou katoa, me karakia ki te whakakapi I tēnei wāhanga, whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mākina kina kiwita, kia mātaratara ki tai, e hiaki ana te atapura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei whatu ora.